All right, everybody, welcome back to the fourth episode of the Richmond Kickers Coaches Corner, where we put two soccer coaches in the same virtual space and we see what happens. My name is Will Selden, and as you probably guessed, I'm the high school coach portion of this conversation. And joining me again for the fourth week running, he hasn't left yet, is head coach and sporting director of the Richmond Kickers, Darren Sawatzky. Darren, how are you again?
I'm doing well, Will. I'm doing well.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Well, before we jump in to today's stuff, there's some potentially exciting news today from the USL about um, potentially lifting the training moratorium. What do you hear about that?
Well, there's an official announcement that went out this morning that said that we're working towards the ability to train in small groups. There are a lot of caveats that go with that to make sure that we're keeping people safe, and it's a breath of fresh air. Not to get too excited yet, but I'm sure our guys are looking forward to getting out on the field a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It was exciting to see it. So I guess it's just dependent on the localities and what people have to do in those different regions. I guess because it's across the USL, right?
Yeah, and there are, the USL has been incredible. Our club's been incredible. All of the clubs are wanting to train, but each different area of the country has its own differing issues as it relates to this pandemic. So, we'll be super respectful of Virginia and the public authorities and do what they are asking us to do. But, I know that the guys are itching to get out on the field. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's cool. That's exciting. Hopefully, a step in the right direction. So I guess for today, kind of going off of what we mentioned last week, but I want to get a little bit nerdier. You always use that phrase in our staff meetings and stuff when you give us updates on the team, and so you always leave out the soccer nerdy stuff, which I'm sure a lot of people appreciate, but I certainly don't. So I want to get nerdy today, if that's okay. We mentioned tactics and tactical setup versus philosophy a little bit last week, but I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into that and kind of how you see not so much the relationship between the two, but tactics specifically and how you set up a team. And last week you mentioned a little bit how different tactics and formations and stuff can sometimes be a little bit semantic, but it's more important how you attack the space and what space you give up to the other team and stuff like that. So I just want to get your opinion on that conversation as a whole and how you think tactics have changed over your coaching career and a little bit of that. So, in your time as a professional coach, how have you seen those things change?
Wow. I guess the place to start, the first thing I would say is we talk a lot about the top coaches around the world, and I think that it would be a little bit arrogant in saying that we can implement some of the things that these high level coaches do. I'm super humbled, and I study as much as I can coaches and teams that I like the way that they play, because that's my attitude, influence, and passion coming out in the game. But I hear coaches talk a lot about this high level coach does this or whatever, and it's I think we need to humble ourselves a little bit, and I certainly do. I want to make sure that I implement it based on how I see the game and on the pieces that I have with it in my team. The very first coach that I really, really paid attention to tactically was Arrigo Sacchi in Italy. The AC Milan teams in the early 90s that had a few Dutch guys on them, and center back Desai, Franco Baresi, Paulo Maldini, and then Frank Rijkaard and Ruud Gullit and Ben Basten. Maybe guys you don't know because you're in the newer generation, but he was so tactically astute on the defensive side in this 4-4-2 and the modifications of that formation that there was a time period in the early 90s where it seemed like everybody played that formation, two strikers and lines of four or a diamond midfield, but your matchups were a little bit easier. Whereas the newer models of the game are more take it to teams and dominate possession and press, and there's differing ways of doing that, different formations from these modified 4-3-3 to just the way that you want to press, who you want to press against, how you want to defend, what space you want to give up. I mean, it's really grown, and it's been amazing to watch it.
Yeah. In my experience, I guess, so I've coached a little bit throughout towards the end of my playing career. Like when I was in college, I coached a team a little bit, and then obviously right out of college, I started coaching. Um, and one thing that my high school coach, who I played for in high school and now I coach with, has always said is that, whenever I'd have conversations with him about tactical setups and how we could get the best out of our teams and stuff, he'd always say that, you know, tactical setups are kind of like fashion trends that they go in and out of style, and a lot of that is dictated by the top level coaches around the world. And so that's not, I don't think that's him bashing the idea of the nuances of tactical setups and stuff. I think it's more just recognizing where that stuff comes from and then trying to implement it into your environment. And so, like you say, um, it would be a little bit arrogant of me to think, you know, I'm going to take this super complicated setup that Pep Guardiola has worked on his whole life, and implement it onto my high school team without enough knowledge about it, or how the little things work. Um, so I think that's something I have to remember as I go throughout my coaching career is that, these finished products that I see on TV and fortunately sometimes in front of my eyes are super, super, super well thought out and really nuanced and not as easy as watching, outside backs pinch in inside and then be like, oh, okay, well that's how I'm going to attack. So it's it's much more complicated, I think, than maybe I've given it credit for in the past, but I'm slowly coming to realize that.
For me, and I can't speak for other coaches, and there are a lot of coaches that are at a higher level than I am, but I would say the first thing, and I learned this when I was really young, is you can't make lemonade without lemons. I mean, you may want to play tiki taka, or you might want to play full field high pressing system, but if you don't have the right components in your ecology, you're not going to be able to do that, and you have to modify it. Something just popped into my head. You're a high school coach, and I had told you before in '05 we won a state championship in Washington State with the team, and at the time, I remember in '05 that this build out of the back, flat back four was this huge, it wasn't new, but it was like, it was the new cycle of that flavor. And we played on these horrible old turf fields, not field turf. I'm talking looked like green concrete. The game was fast and it was just bad soccer. And my brother and I coached, and we decided to play with two man markers and a sweeper, which was like, way, way back. I mean, no one was playing like that. But in high school, it was effective because we could pick up their top strikers and we always had cover. And there was another guy that had in our area that had a good team, and we were kind of fighting for who got in the playoffs. And he just was like, I play a flat back four, and it was very modern. And we smashed him, went on to win a championship. And I just remember talking to him. I was like, yeah, I totally understand. But based on the ecology, I had three good defenders. I had a really quick kid who was my captain that could lead in a sweeper position, and nobody was playing that. It was, old school. But based on what I needed to accomplish, it worked, and we were successful. So there's no wrong way of doing it. I just think that you have to decide how you're going to maximize the talent you have and be able to implement that against teams that set up differently.
Yeah, that's funny to hear you say that. I think sometimes I've come to realize that I'm a little bit of a soccer snob, um, which I'm trying to fix a little bit as I move into my coaching career. But I would be the last person to be like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna play stopper sweeper," because that just seems so old fashioned and not with the times. But it what's important is that you get the best out of your players. And so, like I said, when I see this finished product when I'm watching the Premier League, like I might not have access to those type of players, and obviously the level is different. So my center back might be as much better as other center backs in the league as Virgil van Dijk is, but that doesn't mean he has the same quality or the same ability. And so I mean, it's just as simple as I think looking at the players you have and their abilities and trying to shape a team and a system to fit that. And I think losing some of my soccer snobbery will will go a long way over the course of my career.
I think using guys like Virgil van Dijk, who's arguably arguably the top defender in the world right now. Arguably, there's a lot of really great players, but using him as a way to help teach players and have them learn how to be better at the position they play, I think is really effective. I think you hit on something. You can't make lemonade without lemons, but if you're handed a team with unlimited funds and the top players in the world, I think it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to control spaces of the field and play in a particular way and have a style. I mean, even in the Premier League, at least in my opinion, Norwich is going to have to play differently than Man City is. It's just related to the players they have, but can they be effective? Absolutely. It's just setting up to be able to try to control spaces that you're going to give them and try to control the players on the field that you want to have the ball for the opposition. Where are you going to show people? How are you going to take away their ability to hurt you? I mean, that's where the research and hours and hours of analytics and all that stuff that we do in the modern game is to try to eliminate their ability to hurt you and try to exploit spaces and hurt them. That's tactics are great until you get 20 minutes into a game and you've worked on something all week and you kind of got to crinkle it and throw it over your shoulder and go roll your sleeves up.
Yeah. And you hear all the time, like, a fast goal kind of changes the shape of the game and how it's going to progress. And teams might have a really detailed plan for that game. And then, like you said, you kind of got to throw it out the window as soon as something different happens or doesn't go according to your plan. So there's a lot of decisions on the fly, I'm sure, at the top level, or at every level. So one question I have for you, as you see those tactical changes across the game unfolding, and maybe we'll take USL League One as an example, how do you adjust to that? Is that something that you're an early adopter of those changes, or something that you kind of try to counteract with your own system, or how do you respond to that?
It's an interesting question in our league because our league is set up. There's really a few different types of teams. When you talk about a team like North Texas, they play a pressing system, a counter pressing system like their first team in a way. They want to go get the ball and get at you with combination play and stuff. So what you're going to get because they're in the process of developing players for their first team. So they're not going to go away from that. Orlando last year played a very possession based. You know what you're getting. I think that teams that have good coaching and prepare for you as a standalone team, and maybe you see a little wrinkle. They have the same formation, but they swap wingers based on who your outside backs are or that type of stuff. You have to adjust based on those nuances. And I think it's pretty rare that anybody surprises you. I think that we all work pretty hard, and I'm not saying that teams haven't gotten after us. I remember a game last year in Madison. They scored on my team last year in the first 30 seconds of the game, and we lose this game based on that goal. And it was just we had 65% of the possession. We did everything we wanted to do, except we made one mistake, and they caught us. They very well could have planned to go direct early and get that, and whatever happened, they beat us. So, I think you generally have an idea what you're going to face, and there's small wrinkles and set plays and different things that can decide games. But I tend to concentrate on our tactical piece. Like we account for the other team, but we want to impose our will, and that's. For me as a pro team, that's how you develop a style and an identity, and it takes time. It'll take us a few years to do that in Richmond with me being here with my philosophy. But once that's intact, it's I think it's pretty effective, and guys will know what to do in certain situations.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of in-game coaching, the reason I separate the two is because I think that there's a lot of man management that goes on outside of the 90 minutes and trying to get the best out of your team and, creating that right environment. But in the game, do you think at different levels, the importance of ability to make decisions changes or fluctuates? So I guess what I mean is like something crazy happens to you in one of your USL League One games. It might be a little bit more difficult to react to that because of the level that your teams are playing at versus mine when maybe there's more mistakes that happen. So do you think that changes on the fly increase in importance as you go up in level?
My personal opinion is that you prepare for that with your training environment. If you work incredibly hard so that everybody knows what their job is and what they expect to do, then things don't necessarily surprise you. You're up a goal with 10 minutes left and tired. You're down a goal. You're whatever. Guys should know the scenarios and understand the situation. I think where tactical pieces are really important in games are based on maybe your plan isn't going as well and they're not giving the space that you thought you would get, or matchups aren't correct. Personalities aren't working correctly, whether that's an individual or in pairs, and you have to influence that with a formation change or a personnel change in order to change the tactics a little bit so that you can either be effective on the tactic you were going into the game with, or that you had to change it. If, as an example, if a team always sits in and counters on you, and they show up at your home stadium and that's what you reviewed all week, and all of a sudden they throw 3 guys up front and high press you, for example, you're going to immediately adjust to that. And if your training environment is right, the players generally can do it themselves, but you may need some in-game coaching. And as much as I want to be a get it done in training and watch the players on game day, I have a very difficult time sitting down.
Yeah, that was something I was going to ask you. Are you pretty involved and up on the touchline and active in the game, or do you try to let players figure it out and just let your plan work?
Yes, both.
Okay.
But I would call myself passionate to, almost to a fault. I want so desperately for them to do well and to execute on what they've worked so hard on that I get caught up in trying to help them do that. There are times that I could sit more. My natural instinct in the way that I am is to be busy and moving. So I tend to pace the sidelines. But again, I have to trust players, and good, bad, or ugly, this is our team and we worked on it. And I trust all 25 guys. So the 11 on the field, you have to say, I trust you, and you got to let them make mistakes without cutting their legs off. And you also have to demand of them the level that that they can execute. And that's where the managing comes in, I think.
Yeah, there's certainly a balance to be struck there, and you kind of give off that energetic and passionate vibe. So I'm really looking forward to watching you on the sidelines just as much as I am your team.